know, I noticed in their latest offering, they're allowing their customers to take their iTunes music onto an Android phone, which is fine. They're helping us maybe sell more music. You know, we have some Google properties on our phone. Just because we're competing with somebody doesn't mean we have to be rude.
That's nice. Okay, so last year at our conference, we had a small search company called Siri.
Yeah.
And
well, I don't know if I would describe Siri as a search company.
okay, but it's a search-related company, and I'd like you to describe
I would not. I would.
You now own them, right?
Yeah, we bought them.
So what?
Why?
And there was a lot of speculation. Well, this company's kind of in the search area, and
No,
Apple
they're not in
hasn't.
the search area.
What are they in? How would you
have,
describe it?
They're in the AI area. Yeah.
So you bought them for their engineers and their patents and their knowledge about AI more broadly.
We like what they do a lot.
Okay.
Well, what do you want them to do for you? What are you?
So you're not going into the search business through them or anything like that?
No, we have no plans to go into the search business. That's not something we know about. It's not something we care deeply about. Other people do it well. See, what's so hard for people to remember, and this is good, I think, is go back to pre-iPhone, only 3 years ago. There was no app market for apps on phones. Phones were sold in truly walled gardens, as you know. You railed against this. And the thought that a developer could make an app for a phone was unheard of.
Well, there were apps for the Palm platform. There were some. Palm didn't operate a store, you're right.
Yes.
But there were apps, and
there were a few
independent
handfuls, yes.
companies would sell them, and you could download them.
There were a few handfuls, but there wasn't anything. I mean, there wasn't
nothing like this.
even a % of what there is now.
Right.
It's huge now.
Okay.
And also, when you bought a phone, the carrier dictated what was on that phone.
Right.
iPhone was the first phone where we had a new relationship with a carrier that said, carrier, you worry about the network, we'll worry about what's on the phone.
How are they doing with that network thing here in the U.S.?
Well, they're doing pretty well, actually, in some ways, and they have some work to do in other ways.
And how do you pressure them? Do you when you get so many complaints and
Oh, we meet with them once a quarter, and they're doing a lot. I mean, remember, they're handling way more data traffic than all of their competitors combined. Way more. And so they're having troubles, and they're having troubles. Their biggest trouble right now is getting equipment out of their suppliers so they can beef up these networks. But they have the fastest 3G network, and I think it's improving. I wish I could say rapidly, but I think it's, you know, moderate rate improving. And I think they're going to end up with a very good, very fast network that is actually the most robust for handling lots of data, simply because they got there first and they had the problems. I'm convinced that any other network, had you put this many iPhones on it, would have had the same problems. But I do think they have some issues, and they're working hard on it.
Do you feel the need to move to another network?
Well, that's what I was going to say. You know, in the UK, you went to 3 carriers. It didn't seem to cannibalize your sales.
Right.
In the U.S., would there be an advantage to be on more than one carrier?
There might be.
There might be.
Might be.
So are you going to do it?
The future is long.
How about this year?
How about the short term?
The short term.
We talk about the short term.
Yeah, you know, I can't talk about that stuff. You know that.
Okay, let's talk about the other things you're making, because you talk about you're not going to be in a search. What is your next? You've been here at D. You talked about, I guess, a couple of years ago, not really doing a phone and not doing a tablet or the tablets. You were sort of
different of your
different.
You gave reasons why tablet PC wasn't such a good idea. And another time you talked about you weren't going to do a phone because you had to sell it through the, I think you called them the 5 orifices at the time.
Right. 4, I think.
The carriers. Right. I was calling them the Soviet ministries, but you
right.
had a more colorful phrase. But and you're doing both of those.
Well, you know, we found a way to change that. We found a way to sell the phone that we wanted to sell and define it the way we wanted to define it, have the control that we wanted to have over what was on the phone versus the carrier controlling that. So we were able to change the rules of the game. And that's what got us excited about getting into the phone business.
And when you were talking about it here, you didn't know that you could do that?
No, absolutely didn't think we could. We'd had some discussions, and we didn't think we could. But we were able to persuade AT&T, and they took a very big leap on us. I mean, we'd never been in the handset business before. We'd never been in the phone business in any way, shape, or form. So they took a big leap on us and decided they were going to trust us to do the right thing on the phone. And it's worked out very well. So we were able to change the rules of those games, in the game, in the same way in the tablet.
Yeah, talk about
what I remember telling you on the tablet was that handwriting was probably the slowest input method ever invented, and that it was doomed to failure. Well, what we tried to do was reimagine the tablet. In other words, I think Microsoft did a lot of interesting work on the tablet. What we've done is not compete with what they did. We reimagined it, and what we're doing is completely different than what they did. You know, they're completely stylus-based.
Their tablet PC that they have now.
For 10 years.
Yeah, right.
You know, and what we said at the very beginning was, if you need a stylus, you've already failed.
So let's talk about tablets.
And that drove everything. That drove everything. Their tablet PC was based on a PC.
Right.
Had all the expense of a PC, had the battery life of a PC, had the weight of a PC. It used a PC operating system that really needed the precision of the tip of an arrow of a cursor.
Right.
Well, the minute you throw a stylus out, you cannot get that precision. You have the precision of a finger, which is much cruder. Therefore, you need to have totally different software. So you can't use a PC operating system. And you have to bite the bullet and say, we're going to have to create this from scratch because all the PC apps won't work without being rewritten anyway. And so we built a very different animal.
So when you built this OS, this multi-touch gestural OS for fingers, you didn't do it in a tablet right away. You did it in the phone. What was the, I mean, did you consider doing a tablet when you did the iPhone? Or was it just a natural progression? The iPhone came out, it was a big hit.
I'll actually tell you kind of a secret.
Okay.
Okay.
I actually started on a tablet first.
Really?
And I had this idea of being able to get rid of the keyboard, type on a multi-touch glass display. And I asked our folks, could we come up with a multi-touch display that we could type on, I could rest my hands on and actually type on. And about 6 months later, they called me in and showed me this prototype display. And it was amazing. And I gave it to one of our guys. This was in the early 90s. I mean, early 2000s.
2000s, yeah.
And I gave it to one of our other really brilliant UI folks. And he called me back a few weeks later, and he had inertial scrolling working and a few other things. Now, we were thinking about building a phone at that time. And when I saw the rubber band, inertial scrolling, and a few of the other things, I thought, my God, we can build a phone out of this. And I put the tablet project on the shelf because the phone was more important. And we went and took the next several years and did the iPhone.
So
and when we got our wind back and thought we could take on something next, pulled the tablet off the shelf, took everything we learned from the phone, and went back to work on the tablet.
So where does the tablet go from here? Now, among the many things that people think it's going to do is save journalism. That was, you know, there's a lot of stories about you going to visit publishers and talking about it being the hope of journalism. Do you consider that a goal of yours or anything that's important to you, or is it just that magazines look real pretty on it?
Well, we have a lot of goals with it, but one of my beliefs very strongly is that any democracy depends on a free, healthy press. And so when I think of the most important journalistic endeavors in this country, I think of things like the Washington Post